Today's teaching is actually a continuation of last week's teaching. Last week we had talked about the skulls, God counting by the skulls, right? This week it continues counting, but there's two different words used for the counting. This time it's not by the skulls. This time it's two different words. And the rabbis, they just have a heyday with this. They've got opinion after opinion after opinion as to why there's different words for this. And I didn't know this. I had no idea that the rabbis had so many different opinions about this. But all the opinions are basically the same. They basically say the same thing. I didn't know this. So I started studying it, and I ended up with the same exact information, the same exact understanding that the rabbis had, which made me very happy. So we are going to say this prayer before I do the teaching. Well, that's it. All right, let's say this together, please. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan et kol darkav la'amo Yisrael ketavniot l'kol hadevarim shabashamayim. Let's do it again. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan et kol darkav la'amo Yisrael ketavniot l'kol hadevarim shabashamayim. Blessed are you, Lord our God, everlasting King, who has given all of his ways to his people Israel as pictures of all heavenly things. So, last week we talked about counting by the skulls, gulgulot, and this week in the next Torah portion is also numbering, but it's numbering the Levites. So, let's go to, well, actually I've written out in as accurate way as I possibly could, Bamidbar 4:21 through 44. I've obviously taken out a lot of words from it, but these are the parts that I want you to look at. And notice what's emboldened. Raise the head, count, 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 counted, 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 counted. Then the Lord spoke to Moshe, saying, raise the head of the sons of Gershon. Now that's translated as count, but it's not count, it's raise the head. So this head count, remember, it said count the whole head, singular, one head of Israel. And how did we count the heads of all of Israel? By the skull. Well, in this time, it's talking about only the sons of Gershon, and it says raise the head. Not count the head, raise the head. Raise the head of the sons of Gershon, them also. Now this, two little words, them also, the rabbis go nuts with this. And these two words, them also, is the key to the understanding the whole picture. The sons of Gershon, them also, by their father's house, by their families, you shall count them, all who can enter the work of the tent of meeting. Here's what they did. Here's what Gershon, the sons of Gershon, did. They shall carry the curtains of the Mishkan, the tent of meeting, its covering, and the covering of tachash skin that's on top of it. The curtain for the entrance of the tent of meeting and of the courtyard, and for the entrance of the gate of the court around the tabernacle. Now, if you don't know what the tabernacle and the tabernacle court looks like, you have no idea what it's talking about. So it's a huge tent. It's about 75 feet long, which is about as long as this entire tabernacle, and 30, 40, 50, 45 feet wide. So almost as wide, not quite, about half as wide as this sanctuary. So it's a huge tent, and it has 4 coverings over it. And then outside of that is the courtyard, which is also tents. It's like, standing up curtains. And it goes all the way around the whole courtyard. 150 feet by 75 feet. Okay, so that's what Gershon did. They took care of all the materials, all the curtains, all the things pertaining to the curtains. Then it says, they shall carry the curtains of the tabernacle. As for the sons of Merari, you shall count them by their families. Now, why doesn't it say raise the heads? Now it uses a different word altogether, and it's not skulls either. So now we got count by the skulls. Now we got raise the head. Now we got another word, which we'll talk about. Count them by their families, from 30 years old and upward, even to 50 years old. You shall count them. This is the duty. This is what they did. The boards of the tabernacle. It doesn't mean like thin boards. These boards were 2 feet wide by 18 inches, 1.5 feet thick, by 50 feet tall. Right? 45 feet tall. Okay? That's a tree. That's a whole tree. And these guys lifted the trees. Not only that, but it also says they carried its bars. The bars were as long as this building. And they're this thick. They're huge. And its bases. Now the bases are like cinder blocks, only bigger and heavier. The cinder block, the bases were, they had to take up the entire width of the board, which is 2 feet wide. So the bases are this big, they're this thick, a cubit thick, and they weigh 90 pounds, 90-some pounds a piece, and they had to carry these. Now they only had to carry them from where they were to the wagons in which they were transported, but they had to carry them. You ever carry a bag of cement? A bag of cement is 80 pounds. These are heavier than that. They're pure silver. So, they're carrying heavy stuff. And the pillars around the courtyard, these are also like half a tree. And their bases and their pegs and their ropes and all the equipment and all their service. So, Moshe counted the sons of Kahat, or Kohath, you might have it. Their numbered men by their families were 2,750. Moses and Aaron counted, and the counted men of the sons of Gershon, their counted men were 2,630. These were the counted men of the families of the sons of Gershon, and the counted men of the families of Merari. Their counted men by their families were 3,200. These were the counted men of the families of the sons of Merari. All the counted men of the Levites, their counted men were 8,580. They were counted, his counted men, just as the Lord told Moshe to do. That is ridiculously repetitious, isn't it? Yeah. Now, if something is repeated in the Bible, twice, listen to me, please. If something is repeated in the Bible twice, that's important. If it's repeated 3 times, that's a witness. Yeshua said, let everything be confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses, because that's what it says in the Torah. But what if you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 times? That's important. And people just skip right over this. It is important because everything in the Bible is a picture. So we need to figure out what the picture is. Now here's the bottom line of the picture I'm going to show you. Exodus 19, God says to Israel, if you will listen to my voice and keep my covenant, then you will be my own possession among all the peoples. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests. That is impossible. A king is a king, a priest is a priest. And never the twain shall meet, except in Yeshua. Yeshua is the priest king. But there never was a priest king in Israel, except a guy who came from heaven named Melchizedek. But there was never a priest king in Israel. It's not a picture that God set up to do. But it is a picture for all of Israel to be. So, you'll be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These words you shall speak to the sons of Israel. Who is going to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation? Israel. Come on, answer me, please. You're so beautiful. So, he says, you shall be to me a kingdom of priests. And he says this to Israel only. Right? Now in Revelation 1 and Revelation 5, it says he made us into a kingdom, priest to his God and Father. Now he's quoting Exodus 19. And then after that, in chapter 5, it says, you have made them a kingdom and priests to our God. Now this is impossible. This is not, I mean, Jews reading this go, nah, it's a dumb Christian book. Because there's no such thing as a king priest. So what? Christ made you a kingdom of priests. Oh, goody for you. And Jews look at this and they just discard it like it's foolishness. Why? Because there's never been a king priest in Israel, except for Melchizedek and then Yeshua. But it is a picture that all of Israel was to be. And so in Revelation, in chapter 1 and in chapter 5, in Revelation, he's talking about who? Who's he talking about? Israel, and only Israel. But Christians read this and think he's talking to Christians. But in Exodus 19, he said, say these words to who? Israel. Period. If you listen to my voice and if you keep my covenant, you will be to me my own possession, my segula, my treasure, among all peoples. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. This is Israel. These words you shall speak to the sons of Israel. I cannot emphasize this enough, because even though you guys have been studying pictures, this is still hard to take. It's still hard to believe. And the reason is we want to include everybody. But remember, it's only to Israel, and if anybody goes into that, they're going only into Israel. You get what I'm saying? Yes? No?
I think so.
Yes. But I want you to understand that it's only to Israel. And if anybody goes into it, they're coming in unnaturally. And that's where the passage in Romans 11 is for grafting in the Gentiles. They're grafting it against nature. Against nature. It's like anti-gravity. It's against gravity. All right. So in Revelation 1 and Revelation 5, he's talking about and talking to Israel. Now, let's get back to, God says you'll be a kingdom of priests and a kingdom, kings and priests. What's a priest? Most people don't even know what a priest is. What I mean is they don't know what family they come from, and they don't know the genealogy of who's a priest and who's a Levite. And so they mix together priests and Levites. They are not the same. All priests are Levites because they're from the tribe of Levi, but not all Levites are priests. So here's the genealogy. You have Levi, one of the 12 sons of Jacob. He has 3 sons, Gershon, Merari, and Kahat, or Kohath. You might see it in the Bible as Kohath. Kahat is the one from which the priest comes. Okay? Because Kahat had 4 sons. Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uzziel. And Amram married Yocheved. But guess what? Yocheved might be Levi's daughter. And Amram is the grandson of Levi. And Yocheved might be Levi's daughter. You get what I'm saying? So Amram might have married his aunt.
Right.
Is that correct? Genealogy, right? His aunt, Yocheved. But they could also be cousins. Now the reasons I say might be is because the rabbis don't know. It's unclear. We read this passage in Numbers 26, and it sounds cut and dry. It is not. Numbers 26, about Yocheved. It is not cut and dry. Verse 59. Well, what am I looking at here? The name of Amram's wife was Jochebed. Okay, that's clear cut. The daughter of Levi. Now, it sounds like, clear cut, daughter of Levi, who was born to Levi in Egypt, and she bore to Amram Aaron and Moshe and their sister Miriam. All right, sounds cut and dry, but it's not. And here's why it's not. Because, I don't know, maybe more than 300 times in the Bible, it'll say, Moses, son of Levi, or somebody, son of somebody. And it's not the son, it's the grandson. So it might not be the daughter, it might be the granddaughter. I just don't know, and neither do the rabbis. But that's why the genealogy is set up with Jochebed off to the left, and you can make your own decision. Is she the daughter of Levi or the granddaughter of Levi? But either way, Amram marries Jochebed. Amram is from the son of Kahat, marries Jochebed, and gives birth to Moses, Aaron, Miriam, Aaron, and Moses. And these are in order, by the way. Whoa. These are in order. Miriam, Aaron, and Moses. Miriam's the oldest. Then Aaron, then Moses is the baby. Okay. That's the genealogy. So, what family do the priests come from? No, what family? Under Levi. Kahat. You can't read that? Okay, sorry. Kahat. Or Kohath. All right, this is important. Why do I keep saying this is important? Because we're just getting started. We got a long way to go. Okay, let's go back to the numbering. Now, in last week's Torah portion, the end of it, it says, make a count of the sons of Kahat. That's the one who produced the priest, right? Right? Give me a response. That's the one who produced the priest, correct?
Right.
Oh, nothing. Okay. From Levi's sons by families according to their fathers. Now, when it says count them, it doesn't say count them. It says raise the head. The name of our Torah portion this week is Naso. Naso means to lift up, like a banner, to raise up high. And it says, in order to count Gershon, in order to count Gershon, you raise the head. But it also said that about Kahat. Raise the head of Kahat. That's how he counted them. Do you understand what I'm saying? Raise the head of Kahat, the priests, and then raise the head of the sons of Gershon. Gershon's job was dealing with all the materials, curtains. But then in Numbers 4:29 it says, for the sons of Merari, you shall count them by their families. This is a totally different word. And this is the word that's repeated 15 times. It is the word pakad. Say pakad. 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 So the way it's used in the verse, it says, B'nei Merari lemishpachotam, to their families, lebeit, to the house, avotam, of them, tifkod, same word as pikod, pakad. They're all the same word. Pikud, pakad, pikudah, tifkod, they're all the same word. And this is what the word is for count. It is not count by the skull, nor is it now lift the head. Now we got another word. So what we're seeing here is that when God said to number the tribe of Levi, he said do it two different ways. He said lift the head of Gershon, but count Tifkod Merari. Now again, the job of Gershon was, what should we call that? A shmati, dealing with the shmatis. He's in the rag trade. They deal with all the materials. Okay, the rag trade. And Merari was dealing with all the trees and the bases and all the heavy lumber stuff. So we're going to call them the lumberjacks. The lumberjacks. We have the Shmati kings and the lumberjacks. And they're counted two different ways. This is important. The word pakad it means to strike upon or against, to go to a person, and here's the main meaning. Can you read that? Can you read that? To visit. To visit. This is the most important meaning of this word, to visit. To commit, to charge in the care of somebody. To deposit. To attack. To punish or strike. To set one over something, to muster, to number or count. Got a lot of different meanings, but the basic meaning is to visit. To get up on somebody. Go to them. Go get them. Go to them. Now the word pakudah means to muster or count. Pakudah. We also have the word pikud, which means just literally to visit. Pikudim, which means visits, plural, but you know how it's translated? Commandments or precepts. I don't like the word commandment, but precepts. I don't know why. I don't have the slightest idea why. But that's how it's translated. That's another story for another time. But Merari was to be visited in order to count. Now, these are all the different times in the passage that it uses the word pakad. Numbers 4:23, and you shall count them, Gershon. This is tifkod otam. Tifkod otam. You shall count them. Merari, you shall count them. Tifkod otam. You shall count. Talking about Merari, Tifkod. Counted the sons of Kahat. Kahat is their children of the priests. Yifkod, same word. Their tally, this is of Kahat. Pekudehem, that means their tally. Numbers of Kahat families, Pekudei, counted by Moses. It's Kahat, it's Pakad. Numbers of the sons of Gershon, Ufkudei, their tally of Gershon, Pekudehem. So, Gershon is not just lift ahead. He's also pikud, counted, visited. But it starts by saying lift his head. And the counted of Gershon, Ufkudei, counted by Moshe. This is Gershon, Pakad. Numbers of the sons of Merari, Ufkudei. Their tally of Merari, Pikudehem. These are the counted of Merari, Pekudei, counted by Moses. Talking about Merari, Pakad. All the number of the Levites, HaPekudim, all those counted by Moses, the Levites, Pakad, they're counted ones, the Levites, Pikudehem, they were counted, Ufkudav, the Levites. So, 15 times it says Pikud or, some form of that. This is important because what we're seeing is a division in how God said to count them. Numbers 4:2. Back to this. So what we want to look at is, why is Gershon different? Why is Gershon different? Why is his counting lift the head instead of just pikud? So Numbers 4:2, like I said, it talks about Kahat, and it says, Naso et rosh b'nei Kahat, lift the heads of the sons of Kahat, Metoch b'nei Levi, lemishpachotam, Levet Avotam. Lift the head of the sons of Kahat from Levi's sons by families, according to their fathers' houses. And then that was last week's Torah portion. And then this week starts with the words, Naso et Rosh, B'nai Gershon. Lift the heads of the sons of Gershon. Of them also. Now these three words, of them also, is 2 words in Hebrew. And it's the linchpin for the whole thing. Gam hem. That's what it says. Gam, also, hem, them. Also them. Because it said about Kahat, lift their heads. And about Gershon it says, them too, lift their heads. Not Merari, only Gershon. Why? And this is where the rabbis go on all these rabbi trails to come up with all these spiritual reasons why Gershon is different from Merari. Now, I'm going to back up here. God says that all the believers are going to be priests, right? Right?
Just Israel.
Thank you. He says all of Israel are going to be priests, right?
Yes.
And then he says the believers are grafted into that. So all the believers are then priests. What about Levites? What about Levites?
They're part of Israel.
Well, not for Gentiles. See? So, this is a door. This is how God got the door open for Gentiles to come in. He can't bring them into Kahat. He can't. But he can bring them into, we have Kahat, Merari, and Gershon. There's 2 other kids. So, this is what I'm going to show you, is that Gentile believers can be Levites because of Gershon and Merari. I don't think they can come into Kahat. I don't think so. But they can come into the other Levite families, Gershon and Merari. I'm going to prove it. I'm not just saying it. I'm going to show you this. So, he says about Gershon, them also, in the same way, lift their heads. Now, what this does is it puts Gershon, the rag trade, the shmati salesman, the ones who deal with all the curtains and the tents, it puts them with the priests. They're looked at just like priests. So all the rabbis go, who says they're like priests? Who says Gershon would be like the priests? Who says? And it's so simple. The answer is so simple. These 3 are in order. They're in order. Gershon, Merari, Kahat. Who's the oldest? Who's the oldest? Gershon. He's the firstborn. And because he's the firstborn male, he is a priest. This is what we're going to look at. The firstborn males are priests in the Bible. So now we're going to look at the firstborn. Now remember, all of this is predicated on, founded on, set on, I will make you, Israel, a kingdom of priests. And then in the book of Revelation, talking to all the believers and all of Israel, you will be a kingdom of priests forever. All right, Genesis 4, Cain was the firstborn. Was he good or bad? Cain, was he good or bad? Bad. He's bad. Abel was secondborn, and he was good. That's backwards. The firstborn is like the priest. But in this case, Cain is bad, and he's the firstborn. But guess what it says Abel brought as his offering? First fruits.
Right.
Firstborn. All right, now Genesis 25, Esau and Jacob. Esau, you know he's evil, and he was the firstborn. Remember, he was born first. So he got the birthright. He got, the blessing. And Jacob stole it from him. But he deserved it because he was firstborn. But then it says Jacob became, and this is the trick. This is how God flipped everything. He took something that's totally upside down and backwards and made it right. In Exodus 13, when they were getting ready to leave Egypt, and God is giving the instructions of the Pesach, the Passover, he says, set apart for me all the firstborn. Exodus 13, let's go, verse 2. Sanctify or set apart to me every firstborn, the firstborn of every womb, both man and animal of the sons of Israel. It belongs to me. Now, that is God making Jacob, because this is Jacob, Israel. Jacob is Israel, right?
Yes.
He's making him the firstborn. He says, all the firstborn of Israel will be mine. Esau was the firstborn, but he's the bad guy. Jacob is the secondborn, and so God replaces Esau with Jacob and says, now that's my firstborn. And we know this because God says it. All the firstborn of Israel, of man and beast, it belongs to me. Belongs to me. Okay, so this is the pattern that God set. Then in Genesis 29, Reuben was the firstborn of Jacob, right? Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, first 4 kids from Leah. The firstborn son of Jacob is Reuben. Was he good or bad? He was bad. It says in Genesis 49 he was bad. Remember, he had sex with Jacob's wife.
Oh, yeah.
That's bad. So in Genesis 49, a lot of moving parts here. Verse 4. Uncontrolled, verse 3 is talking about Reuben. Reuben, you are my Bikur, you are my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power. That is fantastic. But then he says, uncontrolled as water, you shall not have the head, preeminence, the first. You're not going to be the Rosh. So he replaces him. Because you went up to your father's bed, you defiled it, you went up to my couch. And so he's demoted. Who replaces him? Anybody know? You would think it'd be Simeon, secondborn, right? No, he goes all the way down the chain to Joseph. Because Joseph is the firstborn of the wife he loved, Rachel. So he replaces Reuben with Joseph. Let's go to Deuteronomy 33. And God says this. God says, I'm going to replace Reuben with Joseph. 33. I keep going to the Spanish. 33:17. It's talking about Joseph here from verse 13. And then in verse 17 it says, as the firstborn of his ox, majesty is his. And his horns are the horns of the wild ox. With them he will push the peoples all at once to the ends of the earth. Those are the 10,000s of Ephraim. Those are the thousands of Manasseh. That's Joseph. Ephraim and Manasseh are Joseph. But he doesn't just say it once. He says it again in Jeremiah 31. He says that Joseph is the firstborn, the Bikur. 31:9. With weeping they will come, and by supplication I will lead them. I will make them walk by streams of water on a straight path in which they will not stumble. Because I'm a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my Bikur. How did Ephraim become his firstborn? Because he replaced Reuben with Joseph. So here's a pattern that we see happening now. That there's a firstborn guy, and God says, nah, you're no good. Get out of the way, I'm going to replace you. This is very important. that God replaces and somebody else becomes the firstborn. How can somebody become the firstborn? That's what God does. He breaks the order and somebody else becomes the firstborn. All right, now in Numbers chapter 8, in our Torah portion this week, when he numbers all the tribes, he replaces, now listen, he replaces the firstborn with the priests and with the Levites. Let me say it that way, with the tribe of Levi. So we have the firstborn, and then God says, you're the priests. And then he replaces the firstborn with the tribe of Levi and makes them the priests and Levites. Got it? So God keeps replacing. He keeps replacing somebody into the position of firstborn. Who was firstborn? Gershon, Merari, or Kahat?
Kahat.
Gershon. And that's why God linked him with Kahat, saying, lift the head. Because now the firstborn becomes the priest. The firstborn becomes the priest. They're the same as the priest. All right, Numbers chapter 8. 16. This is talking about Levi, the tribe of Levi. Well, verse 14. You shall separate Levi from among the sons of Israel, and Levi shall be mine. I own them. Then after the Levites may go in to serve the tent of meeting, but you shall clean them and present them as a wave offering. Why? Because they are wholly given to me from among the sons of Israel. I've taken them for myself instead of every firstborn. In Exodus 13, God said the firstborn belonged to me. But now in Numbers 8, when they come into the land of Israel, God replaces them and says, don't worry about it anymore. Now we have the tribe of Levi. They're now my priests. They're now my firstborn. You've been replaced. Don't worry about it. Okay. I know there's a lot of moving parts to this, so let me review. Kahat, when God numbered him, God said, lift the head. Yeah? Gershon, when he numbered them, God said, lift the head. Why? Because they're the firstborn. And the firstborn are just like the priests. They're looked at like the priests. And then we have the child Merari. He's the lumberjacks. And he never says lift their head. He says visit, 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 over and over again. Visit. All right, here's some more replacing. Somebody becomes the firstborn. First Chronicles. This is a strange passage I never saw before. This is when David is setting up the kingdom. And it's at the end of his life. He's setting up the kingdom. He's about to make Solomon the king. And he's numbering the gatekeepers. Verse 10. And look who the father is. Hosa, one of the sons of Merari. Merari. Not Gershon. Hosa, one of the sons of Merari, had sons. Shimri, the first. Although he was not the Bikur, he was not the firstborn. His father made him first. How can his father make him the firstborn? Same way God did with Reuben and Joseph and Jacob and Esau. He made somebody else the firstborn. And it's strange, he's from the tribe of Merari. Isn't that interesting? So, he made him, he became the head. Now in 1 Samuel 16, you know the story, I hope. When God rejects Saul as being king, and he goes and he looks for a better person, and he finds David. God sends Samuel to David. And Saul's like, oh, that guy's good looking. I'm going to anoint him. And God says, whoa, it's the wrong guy. Wrong guy. 1 Samuel 16. Well, I'm in 2 Samuel. Where am I supposed to be? 1 Samuel. Too many moving parts here. Okay. The Lord said to Shmuel, "How long will you grieve over Shaul? Go find somebody else." Let's go to verse 6. When they entered, what he did is he went to Jesse. God sent him to Jesse. Verse 6, when they entered, he looked at Eliav and thought, "Whoa, this guy is good. This is the Lord's Messiah. This is the Lord's Messiah." But the Lord said to Shmuel, "Whoa, don't look at his appearance or the height of his stature, because I've rejected him. For God sees not as man sees. Man looks at the outward, but the Lord looks at the heart." Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Shmuel. And he said, "No, God hasn't chosen him." So Jesse made Shammah pass by, and he said, "No, Lord hasn't chosen him." And Jesse made 7 of his sons pass by in front. And he says, "Is this it? That all you got? These all the children?" And he said, "Well, there remains the youngest, and behold, he is tending the sheep." And Shmuel said, "Send and bring him. We're not going to sit down and eat till he comes." So they brought him, and he anointed him as the Lord's Messiah. Okay? What number child was he? 8th. And God makes him the firstborn. Makes him the head. Makes him the head. Look at Psalm 89. This is proof that he made him the head. Made him the firstborn. Yo también lo haré mi primogénito. I also shall make him, talking about David, my firstborn. I will make him my firstborn. Is that not weird? I will make him my firstborn, the highest of the kings of the earth. Now, there's proof positive in the Torah that God takes people and replaces somebody else to make him the firstborn. One guy's the firstborn, and God says, "No, he ain't the firstborn anymore. Now somebody else is the firstborn." And he does this on purpose for a reason. So David becomes the firstborn. David is the Messiah. Now, I gave you these verses last week, and I think I told you the wrong numbers. So I got them written out here. I think I told you there were 3 in Jeremiah and 2 in Ezekiel, I think. But here's what they really are. Isaiah 11, and then Jeremiah 30, verse 9, Jeremiah 30, 33. So there's 2 in Jeremiah. And then Ezekiel 34, and Ezekiel 37, and Ezekiel 37 again. 3 in Ezekiel that say David is the Messiah. And then there's 1 in Hosea chapter 3. So let's go to the one in Ezekiel 37, the 2 in Ezekiel 37. That'll probably be the easiest way to do it. 37:24. Now, this is definitely talking about the day of the Lord. He says it over and over again. Let's look at verse 23. They will no longer defile themselves with their idols or their detestable things or any of their sins, but I will deliver them from all their dwelling places in which they have sinned, and will clean them, and they will be my people, and I will be their God. Absolutely during the kingdom. My servant David will be king over them. How can that be possible? David's dead. Even if David is resurrected, maybe, but this is mind-boggling. My servant David will be king over them, and they will all have one shepherd. They will walk in my ordinances and keep my chokim, my statutes, and do them. They will live on the land that I gave to Jacob my servant, in which your fathers lived, and they will live on it. They, their sons, and their sons' sons forever. This is the kingdom. And David, my servant, will be there. Now it says prince. So it says he's the king, then it says he's the prince. Well, make up your mind, God. So what does this mean? Yeshua is Ben David, son of David. So it is David, but it's not David. It's Messiah, Yeshua. But it's also David. We lost power. Okay, Daniel, can you see what's going on, please?
There you go.
Okay, we're back. Never mind. Thank you, sir. Okay, so, strange, eh? So, David becomes the firstborn. Now, remember, the firstborn are looked at as priests. Both of them, God says, lift their head. He doesn't do that with Merari. So Gershon deals with spiritual things. Now this is, their job. They shall carry the curtains of the Mishkan, the Ohel Moed, its mikseh, and the mikseh of tachash skin on top of it. 4 different tents. And they're huge. The curtain, that's the curtain in between the holy place and the Holy of Holies. And there's also a curtain in front of the holy place. 2 curtains. And all the curtains of the courtyard. And the entrance of the gate. There's an entrance 30 feet wide with curtains there too. It's the doorway. All right, so they dealt with all the material, right? Now here's what this amazing guy just died last year. Rabbi Aiden Steinsaltz. He translated the Talmud. He was still in the midst of translating the Talmud when he passed away. Did it for like 50 years or something like that. Amazing rabbi. And he said this. The Kahati, that's the priests, maybe, dealt with the Holy of Holies, except in a few cases, the Ark of the Covenant was not carried by the priests, but by the Levites. What? What? Who carried the Ark? That's what I thought. No. Kahat. Now, Kahat's children were priests, but not all of Kahat were priests. So, the Ark of the Covenant was not carried by the priests, but by the Levites, that being Kahat. Specifically, the Kahati. It was their responsibility to carry the contents of the sanctuary, the sacred vessels, the menorah, the table, the incense altar, all the holy things. They're just like priests, right? They touch the holy things. Now, Gershon was looked at just like the priests. Lift their heads. Why? Because he was firstborn. All right, now Merari, they dealt with the earthly things. Back in the 70s, Monty Python, it's a comedy group from England, and they sang a song. I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay. I sleep all night and I work all day. I cuts down trees, I eats my lunch, I go to the lavatory. Now, if you don't know what a lavatory is, it's a lavatory. It's a bathroom. So they would sing about the lumberjacks. That's Merari, the lumberjacks. They're the lumberjacks. They deal with the here and now. They deal with the down-to-earth stuff. They deal with, life, real things. Not spiritual things, not pictures, but real things. But they're sons of Levi. So they also dealt with spiritual things and pictures. But they also had to deal with this. Not so with Kahat. Kahat, they and the priests, their head was in the clouds. They were all about God and the tabernacle and prayers and the sacrifices and the incense and the altar and all the God all the time. But not Merari. Merari was more like feet on the ground and head in the clouds. So you got to figure out which one you are. And either one is fine. Which one sounds more like the Gentiles who are righteous? Merari or Gershon? Which one sounds more like Christians? You know, dealing with normal stuff, or head in the clouds and dealing with the pictures and Judaism and spirituality. So the Merarites, this is the duty of their loads. The boards, the tabernacle, the bars, the pillars, the bases, the pillars around the courtyard, bases, pegs, ropes, all the equipment. I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay. So they're the lumberjacks. So let's talk about raise the head and the division of the other thing. And here's what they are. For Gershon and for Kahat, you had raise the head, and for everybody else, it's visit. Everybody else is visit. Get what I'm saying? Genesis 48, 14 and 26, both verses. Israel reached out his right hand and placed it on the head of Ephraim. The blessings of your father have surpassed the blessings of my fathers. May they be on the head of Joseph, and on the top of the head of the one distinguished among his brothers. So remember, Joseph replaced Reuben. Now, why are we looking at this verse? Because we're looking at head. What is the head in the Bible? Can you tell me? What is head in the Bible? What is a picture of? I can't hear you. The beginning. Well, beginning is a concept. What thing is it a picture of? What's the head a picture of? What thing? What noun? You don't know? Okay, well, let's look at what head is in the Bible and we'll figure it out. So here, it's talking about Joseph, his head. Deuteronomy 33:16. The favor of him who dwelt in the bush, let it come to the head of Joseph. Again, Joseph. And the top of the head of the one who is prince among his brothers. All right. We're starting to get some sense of what the head is. It has to do with the chosen kid. Maybe. Psalm 18. You have rescued me, and this is David talking. You have rescued me from the contentions of the people. You have placed me as head of the Goyim, head of the Gentiles. Who is this? David. Who's David? The Messiah. No, the Messiah. Remember, we saw in the prophets that David is the Messiah. So we got Joseph's head, we got David's head. Psalm 60. Well, look, here's Ephraim again, the son of Joseph. Ephraim also is the helmet of my head. Isn't that interesting? So what do you think the head is in the Bible? What do you think the head is so far? The Messiah, King, chosen son, firstborn. Okay. By the way, Psalm 108:8 says, word for word, the same thing. Ephraim is the helmet of my head. This is God talking. Ephraim is the helmet on God's head. 1 Samuel 17:54. David took the Philistines' head and brought it to Jerusalem. Now, why do I have this verse? Because we saw it last week. That's why Golgotha is named Golgotha. Because of Golgot, the skull of Goliath, which means skull. And he brought it to Jerusalem, a place he didn't belong, he didn't own, he never went, and he wouldn't for another 30-some years. Ephesians 1:22. And by the way, that's it for the Bible. That's it for the Tanakh. So, what do you think the head is a picture of? What do we have? What's a head in a picture of in the Bible? What do we have? Firstborn, the chosen kid, the Messiah, David, Joseph, those two. Okay? Now here it is in the New Testament. Ephesians 1:22, and put all things in subjection under his feet, and made him, the Messiah, head over all things to the congregation. So what's head a picture of in the Bible? He says it here. I don't know why you're not answering. Please answer. Messiah. He says Messiah. Ephesians 4:15. We are to grow up in all aspects into him who is the head, Messiah. He just comes right out and says it. So that's why Joseph and his child Ephraim and David and Goliath from David are the head. Because it's Messiah. Messiah is the head. Now, I could have just quoted these verses in the New Testament and you'd have gone, yeah, Messiah's the head. But what gives Paul the right to say that in Ephesians and then in Colossians? Who says he can say Messiah is the head? Because it is in the Tanakh. So I showed you the verses in the Tanakh that he is quoting. That's why Shaul said it. Because it says it in Genesis, Deuteronomy, Psalm, 1 Samuel. Okay? That's why he said it. Colossians 1:18, he is also the head of the body, which is the congregation, and he is the beginning, the firstborn of the dead, the Bikurim, the Bikur of the dead. Now we're back to firstborn. All right, so here's the pictures we have laid, one on top of the other. This is as simple as it gets. You got a guy who's firstborn. He's the priest because he's firstborn. But then God takes the Levites and replaces him and says, now some of them are priests. Okay? Yep. All right, now, in order to count the ones that are the priests, lift the head. Lift the head. What's the head in the Bible? Messiah. Lift the head. All right, so now we have, again, priests in the kingdom. Exodus 19 and Revelation 5. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These words you shall speak to the sons of Israel, a kingdom and priests, and they will reign on the earth. Exodus and Revelation, both. Priests in the kingdom. What about Levites? This is what's left out. And I'm trying to think like a Christian. What about me? I mean, that's what Christians should be left feeling. What about me? I mean, we've been in control for 2,000 years. What about me? You can't take that away from me. That's what Christians will feel. Here's the open door for it. Levites, not priests, Levites. In the kingdom, God's going to take all of Israel and make them priests. But who helps the priests? The Levites. So all the nations who are righteous, what you might call Christians, all the nations who are righteous will be Levites in the kingdom. And the Bible says this. It says it. And it's a verse that nobody ever quotes because they can't follow it for some reason. But it's a verse that God showed me before Eileen and I got married when we thought she was a Gentile. And I was like, I can't marry a Gentile. And God showed me this verse and it was like, oh, I get it. In the kingdom, things will be clear, but they're not clear now. It's in Isaiah 66. I love this verse. We're going to read the whole thing so that we have context. This thing is flashing on and off wildly. So, this says to start in verse 18, but we're going to start back in 8. Who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such a thing? Can a land be born in one day? Can a nation be brought forth? This is the birth pangs. All at once, as soon as Zion went into birth pangs, she brought forth her sons. All right, so we're in the birth pangs. We're in the kingdom. Verse 10, be joyful with Jerusalem and rejoice for her, all you who love her. Be exceedingly glad for her, all you who mourn over her, that you may nurse and be satisfied with her comforting breasts. 2 breasts two mountains of Jerusalem. What are the two mountains of Jerusalem called? Anybody know? Nope. Not Gerizim. Zion and Moriah. There you go. Zion and Moriah. Be exceedingly glad, all you who mourn, and may you nurse and be satisfied with her comforting breasts, that you may suck and be delighted with her bountiful bosom. Behold, I will extend peace to her like a river. The glory of the Gentiles like an overflowing stream. And you will be nursed. You will be carried on the hip and fondled on the knees. He's talking to Israel. As one whom the mother comforts, so I will comfort you, and you will be comforted in Jerusalem. Then you will see, and your heart will be glad, and your bones will flourish. So, God is like really comforting Israel, saying, don't worry, in the kingdom, you're going to see that I restore everything. I'm going to restore Jerusalem. I'm going to restore the kingdom. I'm going to restore Judaism. I'm going to restore the temple. I'm going to restore all of the ways of Judaism in the temple. Verse 18. I know their work and their thoughts. The time is coming to gather all Gentiles and tongues, and they will come and see my glory. And I will set among them and will send survivors from them. From who? From Israel? Please answer. From who? From the Gentiles. I will send survivors from the Gentiles to the nations, to the Gentiles. And he names some. Tarshish, Put, Lud, Meshech, Tubal, Yavan. Yavan is Greece. To the distant coastlands that have never heard of my fame or seen my glory. And they will declare my glory among the Gentiles. Then they, who? Jews or Gentiles? Gentiles. Gentiles will bring all your brothers, Israel, from all the Gentiles, all the nations, as a grain offering to the Lord. Just as the sons of Israel bring their grain offering in a clean vessel. Now look at verse 21. Here's where everybody gets lost. I will take some of them. Some of who? Gentiles. For priests and for Levites. Kahat gave the priests. What about the other two sons? Gershon and Merari. Gershon and Merari. Gentiles will come into Gershon and Merari. They may not come into Kahat, but they can come into Gershon and Merari. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
For just as the new heavens and the new earth, which I make, will endure, so your seed and your name will endure. This is amazing. It comes right out. And God says, I will take some Gentiles, some of them I will make priests into Kahat, some, and some will be Levites, Merari and Gershon. So God leaves the door open, not just for priests, but for Levites in the kingdom. I believe this is the Gentiles. He says it's the Gentiles. He says it, right? Did you see it?
Yeah.
So, in the kingdom, it's not just that, quote, Christians will be a kingdom of priests along with Israel. There'll be Levites. There'll be Levites. Gershon, God says, lift their head. And to Merari, he says, count, visit. Visit. I just think this verse is amazing. All right, so we didn't look at all the verses that say visit, but they're bad. They're all about the day of the Lord. It's translated punish, but it's God coming to something. That's why I translated as punish, because he comes to the nations in the day of the Lord. He comes to Israel in the day of the Lord, and he visits. So here's what I'm saying. Everybody is going to be visited by God or have their head lifted. You need to decide what you think you are. Are you a Kahat? Or are you from Gershon? Or are you from Merari? Now, if you're not Jewish, you're probably not from Kahat. But you can be from Gershon and Merari. You can be. Candace Long wrote a book called The Levitical Calling. And that's basically what this book is about. It's talking to Christians, this book. And it says, you are called as a Levite. And then she gives a bunch of verses to say where it says in the Bible that Christians can be looked at as Levites. Well, who are the Levites? Gershon, Merari, and Kahat. Probably can't be Kahat, although maybe some will. But they can be Gershon and Merari. So you need to decide as a believer, are you a lumberjack? I'm a lumberjack. Or are you in the shmati trade and your head is in the clouds and all you care about is spiritual things? Because both are available. And I think, if I'm not incorrect, I may be incorrect, but I don't think I am. In the body of Messiah, there are elders and what's the other one called? You don't know? Deacons. In Hebrew, it's zikanim. Elders means bearded one. And the other one is shamashim, helpers. That's a Levite. The Levites are helpers to the priests. So you need to decide what's your role. Are you more into the physical stuff and you're good at that? Or are you more into the spiritual stuff? Counseling, prayer, Torah study, revelation, pictures. That's a Gershonite or a Kohathite. You're either from Gershon or Kahat. Now this is only something you can decide. You can't be told, you're like from Gershon, you're like from Merari. That's just ridiculous. You have to decide this. You have to think about it. Are you more tied to the things of the earth and you want to just help? You want to help do things? It doesn't mean you're not spiritual. It just means you're more into the physical stuff. Or are you more into the spiritual things? In which case, that's Gershon. So, everybody is either has the head lifted or visited. Everybody. Let's stand. Let's do the Aleinu. Aleinu לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגור עלינו ככל המונם. Let us adore the Lord of all, who in greatness created the world from of old, that he has not made us like the nations of the earth, not made us like the families of the land. He has not made our destiny like theirs, or cast our lot with all of them. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz b'yom hahu B'yom hahu yiyeh Adonai echad Ushemo echad. And it is said, the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day the Lord shall be one, and his name shall be one. Oh, what happened? Oh, we're missing a slide. It went off. All right. Well, Shabbat Shalom. We are going to do Kiddush, I assume. Yes? Okay, let's do Kiddush.